Imagine your deepest secrets, the ones you barely admit to yourself, suddenly splashed across town for everyone to read. We're talking crude, anonymous letters, showing up not just at your door, but at your neighbors, your job, even your kids' school. Sounds like a nightmare, right? Well, for almost 20 years this was reality for the folks in Circleville, Ohio. A poison pen terrorized their small town, pitting neighbor against neighbor, leading to paranoia, violence, and a mystery that's still unsolved. Back in the 1970s, Circleville, Ohio, seemed like your classic American small town. You know the type. Quiet streets, everyone knows your name, big community events like the annual pumpkin show. But in March 1977, though some sources say letters began in 1976, that postcard image got ripped to shreds. Anonymous letters started showing up, all written in this weird, blocky handwriting. And the first main target? A local school bus driver named Mary Gillespie. These letters weren't vague. They accused her outright of having an affair with Gordon Massey, who just happened to be the married superintendent of schools. And the stuff in these letters? It was intensely personal, packed with threats, and hinted that the writer knew Mary's life inside and out, almost like they were obsessed. One chilling letter warned, "I've been observing your house and I know you have children. It's your daughter's turn to pay for what you've done." The writer demanded she end the alleged affair and confess, or else face public humiliation and worse. At first, Mary and her husband, Ron Gillespie, did what many of us might do. They tried to ignore it, perhaps hoping it would all just blow over. But these letters, they didn't stop. If anything, they multiplied. Soon enough, Ron started getting his own charming set of mail, pushing him to do something about his wife and Massey. One even suggested he should catch them together and kill them both. Yeah, it got that dark. And the letter writer didn't stop there. Their campaign spread like wildfire, with letters popping up in mailboxes of other residents, local businesses, and even city officials. Suddenly, Circleville felt like it was under attack. A real fear started to creep through the town. Who could be doing this? A neighbor? A friend? This person seemed to know everyone's business, or at least they acted like they did. That poison pen was turning a once peaceful town into a breeding ground for suspicion and fear. But the harassment didn't just stay on paper. Oh no. The Circleville letter writer got bolder. They started putting up these crude, offensive signs all over town, many of them strategically placed along Mary Gillespie's school bus route. These signs hammered home the same accusations from the letters, sometimes even dragging Mary's kids into it, making the public humiliation and mind games even worse. The whole town was already on edge, and now they had to see these nasty displays every single day. Then, in August 1977, things took a really dark, tragic turn. Ron Gillespie got a phone call, a mysterious one, and apparently, a very upsetting one. From what we know, he told his children he was going to confront the person writing the letters, grabbed his gun, and tore off in his pickup. Later that night, Ron Gillespie was dead. His truck had smashed into a tree. The coroner called it an accident. But hear us where it gets murky. Ron reportedly had almost twice the legal limit of alcohol in his blood, even though some folks said he wasn't much of a drinker. And a .22 caliber revolver fired once was found under his body. A lot of people in Circleville, including Ron's own brother-in-law, Paul Freshour, weren't buying the accident story. Remember, the letter writer had threatened Ron S. life before if he didn't out his wife S. alleged affair. And now, suddenly, he's dead. Had Ron figured out who the writer was? Was his death directly because of all this relentless harassment? These questions were heavy, man. The case went from being about nasty letters to possibly involving a death. The fear in Circleville hit a terrifying new peak. It wasn't just about reputations anymore. It was about life and death. So, for a few years after Ron Gillespie died, the letters kept coming. Sometimes they'd ramp up. Sometimes they'd cool off a bit. And Mary Gillespie? Well, After her husband passed, she did eventually admit she'd been having a relationship with Gordon Massey. The letter writer, of course, stayed fixated on her, and the threats started to get even worse. Then, one morning in February 1983, bam, another major twist. Mary Gillespie was out driving her bus route when she saw an absolutely vile sign aimed at her teenage daughter. She pulled over to take it down, but then she noticed something. It was tied with twine to a box. Smartly, instead of just yanking it, she took the whole thing home and opened it very, very carefully. And inside, a loaded handgun, rigged to go off if the sign was pulled. This was a booby trap, no doubt about it, and it was meant to kill her. Finally, investigators had some real physical evidence to work with. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation managed to get a serial number off the gun. And guess who it was traced back to? Paul Freshour, Mary Gillespie's brother-in-law. Yeah, the same Paul Freshour who'd been so sure Ron Gillespie was murdered. The spotlight immediately swung onto Freshour. His estranged wife, Karen Sue Freshour, who was Ron Gillespie's sister, by the way, told the cops she thought Paul was the letter writer. She claimed to have found letters he'd written stashed in their home. Their divorce was apparently pretty ugly, which could give her a reason to want to point the finger at him. Paul, for his part, denied writing any letters and said the gun in the booby trap had been stolen from him weeks before. But then, he reportedly failed a lie detector test. So with the gun, his ex-wife's testimony, and that failed polygraph, Paul Freshour was arrested. He was charged with trying to murder Mary Gillespie. Now, he wasn't officially charged with writing the letters, but you can bet they played a huge part in the prosecutor's case, painting him as this obsessive, dangerous guy. Paul Freshour went on trial for attempted murder on October 24th, 1983, right there at the Pickaway County Courthouse. Now, remember, he wasn't officially charged with writing the letters, but the prosecution sure made it sound like he was the guy to show he had a motive and a history of harassing Mary Gillespie. Handwriting experts even got up there and said Freshour's handwriting matched that on many of the letters. Mary Gillespie also testified, talking about the letters and that terrifying booby trap. Freshour, though, stuck to his guns. He was innocent. His defense team hammered on the fact that there was no hard physical evidence putting him at the booby trap scene. No fingerprints, nothing like that. He also had an alibi for a big chunk of the day the trap was discovered, though his boss testified he hadn't been at work. Didn't matter. The jury found Paul Freshour guilty of attempted murder. He got a sentence of 7 to 25 years in the slammer. For a lot of folks in Circleville, this conviction felt like a huge weight lifted. It looked like the person behind all those years of fear and threats was finally locked up. The nightmare, everyone hoped, was finally over. But it wasn't. Not even close. Here's where it gets really wild. Even with Paul Freshour in prison, the anonymous letters didn't stop. Hundreds more of them, with that same distinct blocky handwriting, kept showing up. They were postmarked from Columbus. That's where Freshour was incarcerated for a time, though he also spent time in Lima. These new letters tormented Circleville residents, officials, and get this, even Freshour himself in prison. At one point, the prison warden flat out said there was no way Freshour could be sending letters from inside, especially since he was under tight watch, sometimes even in solitary confinement. This threw a massive wrench into the idea that Paul Freshour was the one and only Circleville letter writer, or even the main one. If he's locked up tight, then who in the world was still out there terrorizing the town? The conviction was supposed to be the end of the story, but instead, it just made the mystery even deeper. So, the letters kept coming even after Freshour was jailed. And as you can imagine, this kicked off a whole bunch of theories about who the real Circleville letter writer could be. First off, was Paul Freshour actually innocent? Was he framed, or just wrongly convicted based on shaky evidence and what his ex-wife said? Some people, including journalists who dug into the case, thought so. They pointed to how thin the evidence at his trial really was, and how could he possibly be mailing letters from prison? Then there's Karen Sue Freshour, Paul's ex-wife. Could she have been involved? Maybe she was the main writer, or maybe she cooked up a scheme to frame her ex. The motive? their nasty divorce, and possibly money. Some witnesses even described seeing a man near the booby trap scene who some thought resembled her boyfriend. And what about the idea of more than one writer? Think about it. So many letters, so many secrets spilled, and they kept coming after Fresh Hour was locked up. That made some folks think it wasn't just one person. Maybe it was a group, or even a copycat who got inspired by the original writer. Other names have popped up over the years too. Thomas Lee Dillon, a convicted serial killer, actually claimed from prison in the 1990s that he did it. There were some similarities in the writing style, but the authorities could never nail down a solid link to the Circleville letters. More recently, journalist James Renner suggested it might have been a former school superintendent, Dwight L. Bowman, maybe with a grudge after being fired. But Bowman passed away before anyone could really question him. An ex-FBI profiler, Mary Ellen O'Toole, looked at the case and figured the writer probably had a serious personality disorder. You know, someone driven by a craving for power, control, and who actually enjoyed making people suffer. She had her doubts that Paul Freshour fit that kind of psychological picture, and she wondered if the person writing letters would be the same type to risk setting a physical booby trap. On the flip side, some handwriting experts like Beverly East found these really unique quirks in the writing, especially a weird G that looked like a number 6 ton, that they thought connected Freshour to a lot of the letters even some sent while he was in jail. But that's still up for debate. So why did the letters finally stop? Well, they reportedly dried up around 1994. And here's a kicker. 1994 was the year Paul Freshour got out of prison. Does that point back to him? Or just a weird coincidence? Or maybe the writer or writers just decided, okay, that's enough terror for one town. Paul Freshour insisted he was innocent right up until he died in 2012. The Circleville letter writer. It's still one of America's most fascinating unsolved cases. So, what's your take? Do you think Paul Freshour did it? And if he did, how on earth did those letters keep showing up? Was it someone else all along? Or maybe a whole conspiracy? I'd love to hear what you think. Drop your theories and thoughts in the comments. And hey, if you got a kick out of this unsolved puzzle, do me a favor. Hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into mysteries that just won't quit. The conclusion. For the better part of 2 decades, the Circleville letter writer had a small Ohio town twisted up in knots with threats, accusations, and a seriously creepy insight into people's private lives. This reign of terror stirred up so much fear, led to a death shrouded in suspicion, a shocking attempted murder, and then a conviction that, for a lot of people, just brought up even more questions. Even after all the investigations, all the suspects, all the theories, we still don't know for sure who was behind those notorious letters. The official files might be gathering dust, but the questions? They're still hanging in the air. The Circleville letter writer is a spooky reminder of how one poison pen can absolutely poison a whole community, leaving behind nothing but fear, doubt, and one heck of an unsolved American mystery.